Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to see all of you and to feel the energy that is in this room. Very positive start to our Thursday morning. Thank you all for spending time with us for our 2024 Legislative Preview event. This is always one of my favorite events that we do on an annual basis. My name is Greg Mast, and I am the Executive Director of Clean Energy Economy in Minnesota, or CEEM as we are known. And I'd again just like to say thank you for joining us. We are also joined online by about 100 folks throughout the state of Minnesota and beyond. So good morning to those of you that are also joining us online. So pleased to have you participating with us at this event. So I am very excited for the many conversations that have been taking place and that lie ahead for this morning's event, and the many insights that are going to be delivered, along with the networking connections that are being made. So our time together is very special, and certainly being early December, it's always a really nice way to think about winding down the year. So collectively getting a group of all of us who have been leaning in and working for many, many years on energy issues. So great to see all of you, and thank you for joining us. While many of you are familiar, as an organization, CEEM is proud to represent a unified and strong business voice for energy efficiency and clean energy in Minnesota. Together with our 60-plus business members, we provide unique value to accelerate the transformation of our energy system by focusing on and elevating the business case for clean energy in Minnesota. This includes the 60,000 clean energy jobs and billions of dollars in associated investment that is strengthening and diversifying Minnesota's economy as we work together to lead the way towards an equitable and prosperous clean energy future. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to our event sponsors who help make programs like today's possible. CEEM is grateful to All Energy Solar, our lead event sponsor, as well as supporting sponsors Evergreen Energy, Larkin Hoffman, and True North Solar. I'd also like to thank several of our CEEM board members who have joined us here this morning and are in attendance. If you wouldn't mind, board members, if you could stand and be recognized, I would appreciate that. And I know that we have in the room from the CEEM board, I believe our board chair, Holly Ladd, is in attendance. Our vice chair, Tina Munson, is here, along with Jamie Burrell on our board of directors. I believe Tushar Gampule is also going to be joining us this morning. And if I missed any of our board members, I believe Nina Axelson is also joining us in person here this morning, and a few others are joining us online. So just very much appreciate your continued leadership and stewardship as you contribute and help drive our mission forward. I'd also like to thank our staff. These events are a heavy lift for a small team like ours at CEEM. So along with myself, I'd like to say thank you to Amelia Serling Hennis, our managing director, George Damian, our director of government affairs, and Chandra Herr, who I believe all of you had the pleasure of meeting at check-in, our policy associate. So speaking of our business membership at CEEM, it's very diverse. It consists of Fortune 50 and 100 companies. Our legislators who are joining us here this morning have heard directly and have met several times, either in person, heard committee testimony from a number of the organizations that are on our member cloud on the slide in front of you. And these are the folks that are innovating, that are delivering the clean, reliable, and affordable energy solutions that are benefiting citizens all across our state. So thank you to our CEEM members and for your continued support. So just a very quick overview of our agenda this morning. It includes a very special keynote address from Dr. Pete Wyckoff, Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Department of Commerce, and that will take place in just a few minutes. And Dr. Wyckoff will be outlining how Minnesota is poised to meet the moment to advance a clean energy economy in the state. Dr. Wyckoff's keynote will be then followed by what is always a very much anticipated discussion with our esteemed panel of invited legislators to preview what we might expect to happen this upcoming legislative session in 2024 with respect to energy and transportation. I'm very pleased to have our invited guests and our legislators joining us. That includes Senator Scott Dibble, Senator Nick Frentz, Senator Jason Rarick, Representative Patty Acomb, and Representative Spencer Igo. And this year's panel will be moderated by Walker Orenstein of the Star Tribune. So very excited, so buckle up and also have your questions ready. We are going to try to reserve a few minutes at the end of the panel to take audience questions, as well as those folks that are joining us online. We will be monitoring the chat for any questions that you may have, and we will do our best to get to several of them. So in closing, this past year was historic. It was unprecedented. I think all of us in this room are aware and have had a big role that you have all played is making that happen. These achievements, such as 100% clean energy, our state competitiveness funding, and the myriad of programs, including Minnesota Energy Alley, that will deliver new and innovative clean energy solutions would not have been possible without the dedication, the support, and the voices from every one of you in this room. I thank and commend each of you for your active participation and the leadership that you each provide to ensure that Minnesota continues to lead the way towards a vibrant, clean energy future that benefits all Minnesotans. So with that, I am now very pleased to share a special message from our U.S. Senator Tina Smith that she has prepared to help kick off our time together. And then that will be followed by Dr. Pete Wyckoff and his keynote address.
Hi everyone, I'm Senator Tina Smith. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. And I wish I could be with you in Minneapolis. I want to start by thanking Clean Energy Economy Minnesota for your tireless commitment to transforming our energy systems. Your work is critical, and I'm thankful for your consistent partnership. I also want to give a special shout out to my former colleague and friend, Pete Wyckoff. Pete was my energy staff lead when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. He was instrumental in passing that law and is now doing great things to help Minnesota take advantage of all the clean energy incentives that we helped to get included. Thanks in no small part to Pete, Congress passed the biggest, most powerful climate legislation in history. The Inflation Reduction Act puts us on the forefront of the clean energy transition and is driving the kind of investment and innovation that we need to protect our planet. I worked very hard to get this done, and I know that you did too. And now our job is to turn this law into results. Right now, I'm working with my colleagues to pass meaningful transmission reforms that we so urgently need if we want to maximize the benefits of the IRA. Ensuring reliable transmission between rural areas and urban centers means that every person, no matter where they live, will see the benefits of the clean energy transition. Plus, expanding transmission is critical to meeting our electricity demand and maximizing the benefits of clean electricity. Minnesota is well positioned as a leader in the clean energy transition, and I often talked with folks in Washington about how we could learn from Minnesota's example. So with help from leaders like you, we have set ourselves on a path towards 100% clean energy by 2040, and our goal of 100% net zero economy by 2050. That's within reach. And Minnesota has doubled down on these ambitions by funding the new Minnesota Climate Innovation Finance Authority, which will accelerate the adoption of clean energy technologies across the state. The passage of the IRA was a lesson in perseverance, and we need to bring that same spirit to the work ahead. There is so much opportunity in front of us, from creating clean energy jobs in Minnesota to lowering energy costs for families. So as we look ahead to 2024, I will continue to rely on your partnership and advocacy Your voices are powerful and are making a huge difference for our planet. So thank you again for all of your tremendous work, and enjoy the rest of your event.
Can you all hear me? All right, that works. I didn't put her up to that, so thank you, Senator Smith. Just a little background and context. I see my role as sort of setting up the more important thing to follow, which is the legislative panel. For those who don't know me, who am I, as she just said, was Senator Tina Smith's climate and energy lead until 8 months ago. From when she started, I worked for Senator Al Franken before that. Before that, I was an environmental science professor at the University of Minnesota Morris campus. I always loved being back on campus. Technically, I'm an emeritus professor, and I think that might give me benefits, but I haven't figured them out yet. So maybe someone here at this center can tell me what I'm entitled to. At Commerce, I've been there 8 months now, and in the state enterprise, I've been back 8 months now. I serve multiple roles. If you look at my position description, it says I am half-time enterprise-wide. That is jargon we use to mean cross-agency and win the governor's office. I'll be in D.C. most of next week doing that half of my job. And the other half is at the Department of Commerce, which seems to be about a 200% time job, that half. And there I am one of two assistant commissioners. We both report up through the amazing Michelle Grancy, and then of course Commissioner Grace Arnold. At Commerce, I am in charge of the Energy Development Unit and the Energy Affordability Unit. Those are the two units that do big programs for the most part. I have a little bit of regulatory, but the other Assistant Commissioner, Louise Miltich, is also new. She does regulatory. She's amazing. We work very closely together. A utility called us the two-headed monster, and we are running with that. So we collaborate, hopefully better than you've ever seen across the two sides of the Energy Division of Commerce. Thanks to the people in the room that are going to do this panel, I run around a lot meeting new employees of mine. When I showed up, I had 70 people underneath me. We are hiring 65 more in my area, so we're basically doubling. As of today, we have 40 of those 65 on board. Every 2 weeks when we start new people, have Meet Pete, which is usually a half hour. Today it's an hour because there's so many people starting in my division. So it's a very exciting time. We're bringing on great people. I'll mention a couple of them by name as we go forward. It's also a crazy time. We're doubling in size. We have been a part of Commerce that historically has been mostly pass-through funding or doing programs based on federal funding. And we are doing that in amazing levels that we've never done. Plus, these folks in the room basically upped our budget by an order of magnitude and gave us approximately 60 new programs to stand up. So, thanks. I only say this half in jest. If this legislative session you didn't want to be so busy, we would be able to catch our breath a little bit. So that's my my note to the amazing people in the room. Minnesota's doing huge things. It led off with a 2040 100% clean electricity law. That is nation leading, definitely nation leading for a purple state. We're doing great things that are getting recognized nationally, and it ended with big time investments if we look at what happened in this last legislative session. Historical by Minnesota standards. On the left, you see not the entire list of the nearly 60 programs that my unit in Commerce is standing up. John Kelly, our government affairs person, put this together, and he prefers to run it as sort of the Star Wars crawl at the beginning of a Star Wars movie. So I don't want you to read that. I just want you to see a lot's going on, and the state is getting recognized for it. Nationally, people are saying, oh my gosh, there's cool stuff happening in Minnesota. I'll be on a panel next week in DC saying, there's cool stuff happening in Minnesota. It's very exciting. A lot of the cool stuff happening in Minnesota, a lot of the programs they gave us to set up are actually to leverage the amazing things that are available from the federal side. Those two big bills that are funding at unprecedented rates, the clean energy transition in terms of federal incentives it started out as the Build Back Better Act. It got split into two. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed in 2021. It is now basically fully getting implemented, also called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, just to confuse things. And then the biggest climate change bill ever passed by any legislature anywhere on the planet by far, the Inflation Reduction Act, passed about a year ago. The IRA is something that I'm working with the enterprise to get its head around. One of the things that's been amazing to realize as it came back to Minnesota is the Minnesota agencies and Minnesota NGOs and Minnesota industry is really good at going after federal grants when they are available. And that's great, and we are doing it. I'm about to give you some eye-popping numbers for how much money we're bringing in. The thing to get our heads around about the IRA, most of the money's not in grants. It's in Clean Energy Loan Authority, mostly through the Department of Energy, some of it through the USDA, to the tune of about $500 billion. And then the big money is in federal clean energy tax credits, which are rolling out, still getting stood up. They are uncapped. That's a weird thing that our legislators never really think about, uncapped programs. But the estimates, the official congressional budget estimate is now up to, there will be a $700 billion clean energy stimulus. Private estimates put it well over $1 trillion. We need to figure out how to take full advantage of those clean energy tax credits. They include an amazing thing called direct pay. Thank you, Senator Tina Smith. It would not have happened without her. Direct pay means that things like the state enterprise itself, which is not a tax-paying entity, can get tax credits. It's hard for a lot of folks to begin to get their head around, but we have to do it because we need to get this federal money to ease our amazing clean energy transition. So, first big program that we have rolled, one of the many big programs we are rolling out, thank you Legislature, is a program I'll mention called the State Competitiveness Fund. This is a program where state funds are being used to help us go after federal funds. That is a program that I think even as early as the beginning of next week, you'll see announcements about the first grant recipients. So the first thing we did is we ran a RFP, or please send us proposals to help local government units, NGOs, rural electric co-ops, folks that need help with grant capacity to go after federal grants. We're going to give them grants to help do that. We got an overwhelming response to the RFP. We will give away the full $6 million, and that money will get deployed, helping units that are sub-state in Minnesota go after federal funding. The other thing that we announced in the next couple weeks is the first commitments through the second pool of money, $100 million of state grants to leverage federal grants. Look for that announcement in a couple weeks. We are working through negotiating with the folks that have applied for that first round. And then soon we will have state grants to leverage federal loans and tax credits rolling out as well. Pardon me. So exciting, so much. I lose my voice. The other thing I'll mention, Bali Kumar is somewhere in the room. Minnesota has a green bank. It has a board chair, Bali Kumar from the PACE Loan Group, as of 2 weeks ago. This, by the way, is a commerce program we're standing up, but it will spin off to be its own agency. It also has an incoming, and I'm very pleased about this, interim director, so I will stop being the director of the Green Bank as of January 3rd. Someone much more qualified, most of you know him, Pete Klein, an amazing person, is coming over from the St. Paul Port Authority, last thing before retirement, to get this bank off the ground. So, good stuff happening that will help leverage federal funds, much in excess of the $45 million the state put into that green bank. Just So everybody's aware, we are not just about standing up new state programs. We historically have been about getting federal money and moving federal money through. We write a lot of grants. The Department of Commerce just passed the $1 billion of grants written off of these new federal programs. We have been successful. Thus far, $620 million have come directly through Commerce in terms of federal grants awarded based on these 2 new federal bills. We will quickly get to $800 million for things I know that are going to come through, coming down the pike. That is tying up my original 70 employees a lot, but it's good work. And every week we meet and I say, people, do you realize you just put a $100 million proposal out there? Did you ever in your career put $100 million proposals out there? No. You're putting them out there like every week. So it's crazy. It's good. I have a lot of tired staff. Be nice to them if you meet them. All right. It's not just us. We have other entities in the states that are being very successful at directly going after the money. Excel has about $500 million hydrogen hub proposal coming its way. And then we have other big grants that are starting to come through, not through the state enterprise, but directly to Minnesota entities. We are starting to take advantage of those tax credits. One of the big thrusts of the tax credits is building out domestic supply chains. We are starting to see victories in Minnesota. Other states are ahead of us, so we should work on that. But, for instance, Walker Orenstein just published a story 2 days ago about yet another expansion at Helene. Like, I think these are starting to blur together in people's heads. There's been multiple expansions of solar production through that company in Minnesota. Cummins stood up an electrolyzer factory, like basically overnight in Minnesota. It's already producing. If you don't know what an electrolyzer is, get nerdy. This is exciting stuff. It's an important technology. Sherco Solar is going to come online sooner than you can believe, and it would not have happened without IRA tax credits. I want to end with a challenge and just say, hey, this is not just about winning the climate. This is about being economically competitive. This is about winning things that the national security community worries about. The clean energy transition is happening. It is happening globally. It is happening at a tremendous rate. It is happening at a rate that I don't think most Americans are fathoming. China is winning. Europe is beating us. The IRA and the IIJA are attempts to get us back in the game, and I think they will do that. For instance, solar is exploding in ways I don't think are visible to Minnesotans. Look at the 23 bar there. That is the amount of solar install expected in the world this year. That is mostly red. The red is Chinese install in China. Wherever you build a domestic market, that's where you will get the supply chains. The Chinese bar there is bigger than the entire world installed last year. We cannot fall behind. It is not just the Greens that pushed this in DC. It's the people that worried about our competitiveness. It's the national defense industry. I don't want to say it's us versus China, but it is us, China, and Europe that are the big players here, and Europe and China are ahead of us. China became the #1 car exporter in the world this year, driven mostly by its prowess in EVs. The biggest EV company in the world is not Tesla. We need to not fall behind. China just put online a new generation nuclear reactor yesterday. It is about competitiveness. Minnesota business community needs to be part of the solution. I'll end with just highlighting the EVs. There's been weird, people don't want EVs. Gas car production and people buying cars in the world peaked in 2017. It's in a free fall since then. Gas cars have passed. If you go to China, you'll see that. If you go to Europe, you'll see that. We will get there, but we are behind. EV sales, this is globally. Again, I hate to say that blue bar is China. The purple bar is Europe. The United States is part of that green bar. We are catching up, and we're catching up only because of the IRA and the IIJA, but we are coming from behind. People say Americans don't want EVs, but the data don't show that. The numbers that just came out say we are up year over year 64% for EV sales domestically. This is happening faster than I think anybody really understands. We got to do this transition, we got to do this transition right, and we got to do this transition just. The Biden administration released just last week a report out on where the spending from the IRA has been. It has been in low-income communities. It has been in new factories in places that are not normally what we think of as the winners in America economically. We have to do this transition in a way that benefits all. There's evidence that that is starting to happen. And I will shut up and get to the real legislators and the real important people in the room now. I'll be around. I don't think I have time for questions, but I'll be around afterwards if anybody wants to talk. Thank you.
I get two.
Right there, see that?
I think you and I are sharing.
Microphone? We can totally do that. I'm happy to share with you, Senator. Yeah, we'll be good. We'll be good.
Piece of paper in case I wanted to write something down while we're going.
Everybody good over there? Well, thank you all for being here and for having me. Thank you to Clean Energy Economy Minnesota. Again, I'm Walker Orenstein, reporter for the Tribune. I'm new in that job. It's only been like a month and a half, but before that I was at MinPost where I covered the legislature a lot, greater Minnesota issues, and also tended to cover energy policy and climate policy at that outlet, including mining policy and some other things. I wanted to ask the question that's on everybody's mind first, which is, which state flag design do you, no, it's okay. Never mind.
We like the seal.
Yeah, the
I like the
seal.
seal. That's right. We can all get agreement there.
So thank you to all the legislators for being here. I just wanted to set the stage myself a little bit briefly. You know, we all know a little bit about what happened last year. Democrats took control of the Senate, had control of the House, and used that to pass much, if not substantially all of their legislative agenda and wish list at the Capitol last year. Senator Frentz may disagree, I don't know. You know, big part of that was obviously the carbon-free law, but they did a lot of other things, pouring money into government programs, smorgasbord of rebates for things like electric cars and heat pumps. Transportation side of things did a lot of stuff too, raised a lot of money, had a lot of programs, and I'm sure Senator Dibble will have lots to say about that. Republicans, on the other hand, were left to largely try and shape kind of the final product, do what they could around the edges to try and make it as good as they felt like it could be. I don't know how you all feel about how successful that went, but this year is an interesting year. A lot less money on the table, maybe a budget deficit looming, an election year coming up, and so it will be very interesting to see kind of how lawmakers want to handle that. And I guess I just wanted to start with that, just a really broad, basic question for you all. You know, what will be or should be the priority of legislators on climate and energy policy heading into next year. Knowing those constraints compared to last legislative session. And yeah, for Republican lawmakers, what should it be, and what would be your alternative vision for energy policy if you were in full control? And I suppose we could start here on the end with Representative Igo.
Right. Oh, well, thank you, Walker. I guess to kind of start that question off, you kind of let it up perfectly. We have that surplus we're seeing right now, but deficit in the tails. I think a policy we could be looking towards is, again, focus on that all-of-the-above energy approach. Solar and wind are great, but we need to focus on everything that we have. And we could implement a lot of policy that necessarily wouldn't cost taxpayers anything, that could actually incentivize our economy here in Minnesota. Kind of what Dr. Wyckoff was talking about. When we talk about domestic supply chains, and I'm going to give you my Iron Range plug right away, we have the critical minerals up there to develop everything we need for this electrical revolution that we're in right now. So the policy that I would want to lead on, and that I'm trying to lead on in a lot of the bills that I carry, is let's find ways to fix permitting and regulation reform. Let's bring manufacturing to Minnesota, and let's create a circular economy where we mine, manufacture, produce, and recycle everything that we create for this electrical revolution, make Minnesota the hub for this, put our people to work, and we can all benefit from it. And I think that's the vision we could have moving forward in a very bipartisan way, and Minnesota would win.
Yeah, thank you for being here. One of the perspectives that I've brought to the Capitol around energy since being here is, there are three factors that we have to look at. We have to be cleaner, but we have to remain affordable, and we have to remain reliable, especially that piece. Minnesotans expect that. And I think what will drive us and keep that reliability piece is technology, what is emerging and what is available. And sometimes we tend to get ahead of ourselves, and I'm just a little worried about the clean energy by 2040 getting ahead of ourselves when we're not allowing all the technologies to be included in that. To me, the big piece is the nuclear, and Dr. Wyckoff mentioned, China is bringing on some new nuclear. If we're going to be carbon free and we're going to produce the amount of electricity that we need in this transition, wind and solar are not going to get us there. So we need to be looking at, increasing that technology for battery storage, and what is that other source to keep us reliable. And I believe some of our new technologies around nuclear give us that opportunity to get there, but we're not allowed to do that in Minnesota. And then the other thing, if we can't start removing technologies that we currently have that keep us affordable and reliable, propane and natural gas are incredibly important for Minnesota right now, and so we can't start saying we have to just arbitrarily remove them from the mix until we know technologies are actually in place to replace them. And so we have to be very careful as we move forward, and that's one of the things I will constantly say. We can't just arbitrarily drive things. Technology will get us there, not the legislature.
Well, thank you, Walker. And really, I want to start out by thanking all of you for the incredible work you do to help us on this transition. So start with that. But as I look to 2024, what I will say are kind of my priorities and the things that we need to be working on. And I think some of this was reiterated by Dr. Wyckoff. And I think first we need to be looking at how we can be putting more solar of all types in, and whether that's rooftop, community solar, distributed, and utility scale. We need to be, as Dr. Wyckoff said, we need to be moving faster, and we need to be looking at all types of solar. And in that, we need to also be looking at the interconnection backlog, and also the transmission issues, and that's timeline and the barriers that prevent us from deploying more solar and more renewable projects. And so looking at the permitting process is certainly going to be important. I will say over the legislative interim, the House has taken several opportunities to go out and look at things in the field. We were just recently down in Northfield and saw the Hillcrest Village, which is a new construction project that is incredibly energy efficient, and it's all electric. And it doesn't cost more. In fact, it costs less. For people living in those units, their total heat, cooling, and electricity is $240 a year. So not only can we make it competitive for the developers, but we can make it more affordable for people that are living there. So finding ways that we can remove barriers and be ensuring that we're getting energy efficient construction is going to be really important. And then I think we also need to be looking at how can we decarbonize our heating? We've done a good job at setting targets for our electricity. So looking at air source heat pumps, which are incredibly efficient, and also district and networked geothermal. We're seeing communities around our state that are starting to implement it, and this is going to be a huge way that we can work to decarbonize our heating. So those are my priorities.
Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. I want to start by thanking Walker. Thanks to my fellow panelists. Thank you, Greg. Thanks, George. Thanks, Chandra. Everybody at CEEM. My name is Nick Frentz. I live in North Mankato. I'm very proud to chair the Senate Energy, Utility, Climate, Environment Committee. I'm a first-year chair, so lots to learn. I'm also a business owner. We own a law firm. We own some bagel shops in the past, own car wholesaling. And I want to start with this very important theme. In addition to our thanks to CEEM members, we are asking to partner with you to help us achieve the goals that have already been identified here. Dr. Wyckoff, I hear competitiveness, and I do not think we will succeed on our decarbonizing goals without partnering with businesses, nonprofits, advocacy groups, and go with you, because only then is the public going to go with us. Some of you have heard me talk about some of the setbacks our clean energy efforts in this country have seen, and it almost always comes down to an unwillingness to acknowledge that the public is who we serve. And at a certain point, the cost to the public is going to be rejected. Great Britain experienced a setback in their electric vehicle program this summer. I'm optimistic we can do these things, but we will have to do them with you. We cannot be at odds with each other. The legislature is a partner of yours. That doesn't mean we're like your best friend. We are free to disagree, and we will. I want to agree with Senator Rarick. The two areas where we're likely to disagree are reliability and cost. We are the voice of the public on the reliability and cost issues. We are the ones who say, here's what the public will tolerate. And how do you know? If you don't listen to the public, pretty soon you're going to be the ex-senator. And I think democracy works in that way. Having said that, I'm incredibly optimistic. Not only has Minnesota got a good partner in the federal government, but we have bright, innovative companies who have brought us to this point. I think going forward in the next session, I do not see a big budget target, if any budget target at all. Some of you know that the news yesterday on the budget included a shorter term surplus with a much more flat revenue picture compared to spending going forward. So we're going to be able to tweak a few things. And I have to hand the mic over to my colleague, Senator Dibble, and reminisce about a moment we had. I was the ranking member when Democrats were in the minority on the Energy Committee, and I talked to Senator Dibble and Senator Marty in the first few weeks of that, and they set me up for a phone call. So I'd been the ranking member for 20 days, and they reminded me that between them they had 50 years combined in the Senate. And after that, they said, here's some stuff you may not have thought of. And so I hope all the legislators agree with me. We're going to have to think through all this stuff, and we're going to have to listen to those people that have the most expertise, and many of them are in this room right now. Hey, Scott.
But then he immediately surpassed us in wisdom and ability and effectiveness. So, thank you very much. Let me also thank everyone. Everything that Nick said, I repeat and then double down on the thanks to everyone in the room for all of your intelligence and innovation and just really helping push us to do more and better in this state. It's a great room to be in and be a part of this discussion. And the great thing about going last is I don't have to repeat everything because I literally agree with everything everyone said, including Representative Igo and Senator Rarick. I would just have a slightly different take and nuanced approach on some of the points that they made. Getting down to some of the specific things that I think about when I think about priorities in the coming session, Senator Frentz is exactly right, and Dr. Wyckoff was right. We've done a lot in the first half of this biennium. Probably won't have as ambitious a list. We won't have that big, long list of achievements to turn in at the end of 2024. We're going to have to go back to some of that work and see what's working and what's not, what needs more regulatory help, to Representative Acomb's point around permitting, et cetera. But rising to the top of my list is really taking a hard look at who is participating in the clean energy economy in terms of both folks who have access to the array of services and opportunities that are made available from an income perspective, as well as making sure that we're getting folks into the jobs that are going to support the future. And that is a big constraint. I've been traveling around the state with the Capital Investments, the Bonding Committee, visiting Crookston, Morris, a lot of our local community college campuses. Senator Frentz has hosted us in Mankato and other places, and there's just a clamor for people to get into the trades to make sure that we can realize the future that we're all talking about. So that's huge. Transmission, gigantic. Really taking a look at folks' access to weatherization and other kinds of energy services in the warm weather months, akin to LIHEAP. We need to be taking a look at how people are affected now in the warm weather months. All of the conversation around resiliency, the level of warming that is going to be happening has implications for public infrastructure, for private endeavors, et cetera. And then, of course, we need to start talking about the ag sector, building, manufacturing and heavy industry, aviation, the hard to electrify sectors, and that's, electricization, what Cummins is doing, what we're talking about in sustainable aviation fuels and the like. And then, of course, a lot of conversation needs to occur in transportation. And, there's a whole menu of things that we could do around land use, around technology, around mode shift, and fuel source and the like. So those are my priorities. Just a small list. Thanks.
One thing I wanted to ask about was, I'm going to start with Democrats on this one. The carbon-free law, do you see that as a work in progress or a finished product? In other words, does it need to be changed in any way this year, whether that's adding things to it, like, say, a battery storage mandate, or subtracting things from it, or altering anything that you feel like was a mistake? Will there be any revisiting of that, or will it be sort of let it lie?
Starting with you.
Sure.
Great. Well, I think that we can look at the 100% by 2040 law, and certainly, as it was described earlier, recognize that it's nation leading. But I think when we know better, we do better. And so if there are ways that we can continue to improve it and make us and help us do even better, I think that's great. So if there are ideas, I certainly think that the notion of storage is an important one in order to get us to our goals. And so certainly open to the conversations, and I don't think anything is quite finished ever. So.
Yeah, I agree with Chair Acomb. We have a duty as the legislature to revisit our work. Two big ways in which work gets adjusted is the implementation didn't go like we thought, happens sometimes in government, and new information comes to light. Oh, I didn't realize that. We hadn't had that information at the time. So I think in every jurisdiction, transportation, health and human services, energy, there's a duty on the legislature's part to say, hey, did we get it right the first time? Do we have a need to adjust it? Having said that, we've been out of session now for half a year. Nobody bringing any big changes to me. Nobody saying, hey, the Senate needs to look at this change or this fix to the 100% bill. We're always working on implementation. And as the chief author of the Senate bill, I'm incredibly proud of it. And I would like to think that if there was a need to change, people would be saying, Nick, would you look at this? Or advocates would be coming forward saying, what about the change? I can't resist, Walker, since you threw it out there. The main thing that we need CEEM partnership on is the idea that we're going to get to 100%, which I think Minnesota can do. But we will have to have input from CEEM members about how it's working as we go along, especially since some of the resource planning by these utilities comes 8, 10, 12 years out. And so speak up, let us know. We do not know, we do not have a crystal ball how exactly we're going to get there. We do have some modeling about the mix, wind, solar, nuclear, all of our options, but we will need to have your partnership. And the more you're willing to say, hey, I think this might work better if you did it this way, the more likely we are to achieve those goals.
For the Republican Senator Rarick, Representative Igo, if Republicans had control, what would be the number one thing you would change about that law? And would you push to simply repeal it if given the opportunity?
I think as I look back and think about what we've done as Republicans when we had the lead, Senator Senjum had led very incredibly with his Clean Energy First bill. And so I would probably, lean towards that rather than the 2040 bill. That didn't put government in a place of demanding that you have to get here, you have to use this. It set up a pathway for utilities to look at what their cleanest options were. And it opened the door as well to emerging technologies, and it didn't put one or two as the top priorities. It allowed the utilities and people to look at emerging technologies and to really take into account that affordability and reliability piece, which again I think is so important. Hate to pick on him, but as Senator Frentz just said, he goes, I think we can get there. Well, should we be passing a bill that says we have to get there when we only think we can get there at this time? So that's the difference, I think, the different approach that Republicans would have taken. Like I said, we're moving towards this cleaner energy future, but let's do it in a way that is going to be driven by the technology that's emerging. And I think sometimes when we put so much focus on one or two, we tamper the ability for a new technology to rise up that has great potential. As I look at it, I think we're putting so much emphasis on electric vehicles. We're really potentially losing out on the ability for hydrogen vehicles to emerge, which technology may get us to a point where that would actually be a better option. But if we put all of our attention onto electric vehicles, how are we ever going to realize that? So I think that's the difference that Republicans would take is let's not mandate it, let's help drive, but follow technology.
And I'll just kind of build off that. Repealing it, no. I think there's things that we could have done to make it a lot better. And the conversation I always had was we could have added more tools to the toolbox of Minnesota. Some of the bills that I carry that I wanted to add to that was ending the nuclear moratorium, having carbon capture and carbon sequestration language be a part of the state so we could start getting those federal dollars. Working on biomass and biofuels. Those kind of things were kind of left off to the side on this bill, and if Republicans were in charge, that would be something that I would want to add. Because if we give those things, like Senator Rarick was saying, we give different industries rise, we give utilities, we give IOUs, we give munis the chance to diversify and have the ability to find what works for their communities. Because I'm well aware that my community of Hibbing in northern Minnesota is way different than the community I'm sitting in right now when it comes to needs for everything. But let's have them have the tools they need to reach this electric revolution that we know we're in, but it's all going to be different for all of us. And the sustainability is different too. When we talk about how the energy demands, like, for example, most of my constituents have a well and a septic system. They're not a part of any sort of centralized wastewater or sewer that needs all different types of energy to make that work. They're living sustainably off the grid. But they have different energy needs because of that, right? So is that going to mean they need to have a high-efficiency wood furnace to keep their house going? That they can sustainably harvest from their back acreage? Maybe. Does that mean an electric heat pump might work if they have a newer home that's well-insulated? Maybe. But these are all things that we could have looked at better when we're doing the 2040 bill to allow for options so that Minnesota could get there as one Minnesota, whether you're in Minneapolis or you're in Hibbing.
Hey, let's talk about permitting. As we head toward 2040, one priority of many in the electric sector is an easier road to building things like transmission lines, wind and solar farms, and I know for others, just all sorts of projects. For instance, I know writing about sustainable aviation fuels, the biofuels sector said one big problem for them is permitting in Minnesota as one reason why they're less interested in building a sector here. So can you all just talk about, is that a reality? Is it possible at the legislature this year that we might see some big changes to permitting? Will it be specific to the energy sector? And I also wondered if everyone could talk a little bit about their views on the prime farmland rule. Sort of sits at the heart of debate over agriculture and siting of these projects. And I know in a lot of the Republican districts is where a lot of these projects might go. And so I wondered if folks are interested in repealing that or keeping that around. And we could start at this end at this time.
trying to think how I want to start with that. That was kind of a lot.
Sorry, yeah, you could pick one of them if you'd like, but yeah.
I'll start with the prime farmland then. We look at that. It's important that when we look at permitting these projects and how we want to regulate them, that we keep in mind that permitting isn't only just making sure that Minnesota does things the right way, but it's also out of respect for the communities that those projects are going to be in. And I'll use examples of projects that have been stuck in permitting in my neck of the woods. It's not just those projects waiting to offer jobs and economic opportunity, it's those places that are being on hold for the communities that desperately need them. And we need to have them be a part of the conversation. So if we could fix permitting with a simple timelines, which is one of the things that's been proposed for the last, 6-7 years, it could open up the ability to say, all right, let's use a solar farm, for example, is coming to this rural community. We're gonna know in 6, 12, 18, or 24 months where they're at and if they're gonna make it or if they have to move. And I think that's critically important as we as Minnesotans are planning this electrical revolution, if we know those things are gonna happen. That's a simple fix. And that's gonna require the agencies to work with those communities and work with the laws that we have on the books. I think that's critically important. And as we talk with the prime ag, we have a lot of land in the state of Minnesota, and some of it's used in different ways. For example, the county that I reside in, over 70% of the land is either federal or state. There's a lot of land out there that we could be utilizing for wind and solar, but we cannot take too many steps forward too quickly and lock up prime agricultural land in whether it be 10, 15, or 20-year solar leases out of the concern of what if we need that prime ag back. One of the conversations that Dr. Wyckoff is talking about is that competition that we have with the Chinese. Well, if we keep on losing our ag abilities or losing other abilities and have to rely on imports, that's going to hurt not only Minnesotans, but the American public as a whole. So we need to make sure that when we have these approaches, we are being all-inclusive of the multiple different angles that are ahead of us. And that's just kind of my take on that very large question.
Yeah, I think when we look at the ag piece, one of the things that I would really like to look at is, a lot of communities have put in zoning ordinances. They want to drive, commercial can go here, ag here, residential here. But what we have is anything over 50 megawatts goes directly to the PUC, and the locals, the county, the township, they lose all ability to have any say in that. And so one of the things that I see in my area is if wind or solar come in and take away the ability for a farm field to be used anymore, the farmer then goes and puts drain tile in some other land to be able to use it, and then the complaints start coming in. Well, why are they going there? Why are they drain tiling this land? And I think if we were to follow some of the, these ordinance, allow locals to drive some of that to say, this is a place where we're going to preserve our ag, that would really help prevent farmers from moving into areas that are not your prime farm land. And then one that I'm passionate about is the permitting. And I am all in on making, and I've supported, helping the transmission lines get approved faster and go through less of a process. But for me, it's an all or nothing. There are so many sectors in Minnesota that deal with this very same issue. There was a point here this summer to get a plumbing permit approved. It was taking 13 to 14 weeks at the Department of Labor and Industry. There are so many stories of companies that were looking to expand, and because the process was so long, they moved to another state because it happened so much faster and they knew what it would take to get going. And another complaint that I've heard is around this permitting process is you're given what you need to do and you're working towards it and you're just about there, and then something else is added to it. Something else is added to it. You never know for sure what that final end place is when you're going to get approved. So those are things, we have to do that for manufacturing, we have to do that for construction, and we have to do it for our energy all together. We can't pick one sector, oh, you get relief from that, because what's going to happen? If all of our industry leaves, it's really not that important. So I think this is you're going to hear me advocate for it, but if it's for one sector, I will not be able to support that. It has to be across the board for everyone.
Thanks. I'll start with the prime farmland issue. And if we look at the landscape in Minnesota, let's just, put it in the context that it really is. And it's a fraction of a percent of prime farmland that is used for solar. It is a very small percentage, and yet it's an argument that is used often. And I will say there are some solar companies that are doing incredible things that are combining both agriculture and solar for a win-win outcome, which are giving maybe new and emerging farmers a place to be able to have access to land to be able to start farming and actually grow food, as well as being able to utilize that land for solar. And I will say that most farmers are happy, maybe sometimes looking for a way to diversify their income stream, and they're going to choose the least productive land to put solar on. And so the prime farmland issue for me is one that we do need to address, and I think that it's not as big an issue in our state as we make it out to be. And as far as permitting reform, I have heard from many, many people that what's really important to understand, and these are businesses, is the timeline and then the expectations that puts on business. And so, yes, I do think there are ways that we can set, defined limits on how long agencies or organizations have to get information back and forth and to be able to move the process along, because it's really important that we are able to, whether it's siting or transmission, any of it, the permitting issues and the barriers that they cause are causing problems and are slowing the process.
Well, Dr. Wyckoff, again, competitiveness. So let's admit this, Minnesota's not as good at permitting as other states, especially those around us. And let's just imagine for a minute that CEEM member businesses care about whether we're competitive on permitting. Part of our permitting struggles come from the opportunities we create for people to object. That's a legitimate thing. We want the public to have input. That's good. How long do we allow that input, and what type of objection and what type of delay does that create? I think we better talk about that. I think we can do better. I also think the timelines are a little longer than other states, and I would just say, I always get nervous when people say, well, yeah, so-and-so says this, and also so-and-so, and she says this, and he says this, but they're all wrong because this. I think we have to watch other states and say, they're not getting the same type of complaints about permitting. That suggests to me that the things they do on timelines may be workable for Minnesota businesses. I'd also say, and I think my colleagues have hit on this a little bit, the predictability of the permitting process. I mean, again, in your businesses, don't you want to have some basic predictability in order to say this is what it's going to cost us, this is the revenue that we expect to reap, and this is why we think that's a good idea for our business and our shareholders. Minnesota permitting lacks a little bit of that predictability, and I really believe we could have a serious discussion to just say, whatever our timelines, this is what you're going to get. I do think that will cause advocacy to say, well, what if we think of this? And I think at some point, if we want to partner with CEEM members, we're going to have to say, yeah, we're not creating an open field for constant objection for the next 100,000 years. I also agree with Representative Igo and Senator Rarick on this point, which I hear in the Senate chamber from time to time. We really are talking about a statewide permitting issue that is not limited to energy. My district has agriculture, about 2,000 family farms, and they have some real complaints. I will just throw out in defense of the agencies, there are some agency staffing issues. I'm encouraged to hear Commerce is hiring, but let's face it, many of our agencies have roles for 10 people, and they got 7 people doing those jobs. So some of the work that's just not able to be done is not the result of policy that stinks so much as we don't have 10 people, we got 7. And I believe we're on the right path there. Prime farmland is a very simple one for me. Again, large agricultural district, unusual for a Democrat. Very much respect the work that our family farms do. There's no chance of me supporting a radical change to prime farmland as long as I'm representing this district. I am willing to talk about compromise and talk to Commissioner Tom Peterson from the Agriculture Department this week. He thinks there's room for us to discuss it, but the general sense of it amongst the farming communities are not making any more of it, and you're driving up the price, and this step that we have on prime farmland is reasonable to prevent us. And I can't resist, since agriculture is still a $20 billion industry, these are small businesses, these families that operate these farms. We got to ask ourselves too if we're doing things that make us less competitive in the global market on agriculture. Where I live, we have corn and soybeans, we grow it and we sell it. I just want to share with you all that we have to respect all types of businesses.
So everything's been said, but not everyone has said it, so I'll just jump in. I'll be very quick on permitting. I actually agree with everyone. Again, probably a nuanced, slightly different take. Permitting is that opportunity to have a process where we look at whether or not our various standards that are in the public's interest are being upheld. We have the opportunity for public conversation, and we don't want to inhibit either of those. But when there are the kinds of delays that aren't warranted, we want to address that. I actually have a lot of experience with that, working as an aide to a city council member, and people trying to start businesses in our neighborhoods, and the sensitivity to issues around timing for finance and other sorts of business issues are at radical variance with the sensitivity that people who are administering the codes and the laws in the public's interest. And so trying to bring those together is what's important, without diminishing the opportunity, again, for public conversation and upholding the standards that secure the public's interest. On this issue of land use, I get it, but I sense a lot of inconsistency. Again, traveling around the state, a lot of communities super excited about the next 50 house development at the edge of town, using up all kinds of farmland at the edge of the metro, regional centers, small communities, and the like. Not a peep about the use of those agricultural land resources, but we have seemed to get anxious when we're talking about energy development issues. So if there's some consistency around this conversation, I'm a little more sensitive and attuned to it. Seems to be a lot of inconsistency. Everyone's super excited about expansion and development and growth, except when it comes to putting in solar fields. So I'll just put that out there. Thanks.
So I'll start with Senator Dibble here. I want to jump to a low carbon fuel standard, or as you have called it, the
Clean Transportation Standard.
Clean Transportation Standard. So for those that don't know, it's a policy that essentially requires transportation fuels to become cleaner over time and involves sort of like credit trading systems. It's something that California has done, Washington and Oregon. There may be other states, but those are the primary ones. This is a policy that has gained traction in the House, but not so much in the Senate over recent years. I'm going to limit this to just Senator Dibble and Representative Acomb maybe. Can you touch on, do you think that that's both a good policy and it has a chance in the Senate this year to be reality?
Yes and maybe. I think it's good policy. I think the simple fact of the matter is that we've done a lot in this last year in the transportation area in the bill itself to bring down transportation's contribution, hopefully, to global warming. Whether that's funding transit, making active transportation, non-motorized transportation more accessible, tying transportation infrastructure decisions to implications for greenhouse gases and global warming, whether that's through comp planning or siting of transportation facilities, et cetera. Electric vehicle advances, just a whole menu of things that we've done. But the simple fact is that transportation now contributes the most to global warming, to greenhouse gases in Minnesota and the entire country, and is moving in the wrong direction, unfortunately. Despite all of the uptake of electric vehicle adoption, we're still moving in the wrong direction in the transportation sector. And among the menu of options that we need to look at, of course, are, like I said before, land use, technology, how people get around, and of course the energy source. And this is, potentially a very, very powerful policy lever to do so, to similar to the energy sector, to try to create a goal for reduction and ultimately elimination of greenhouse gases from the transportation sector, and find ways and policy levers for so doing, ramping it down and really incenting the uptake of new and possibly creating innovation in that sector in terms of technology, services, and other methods. As far as our prospects, there's been a great conversation that's been going on since we kind of put our first foot forward last session. In the interim, I'm hearing, I didn't attend those meetings and conversations, but I'm hearing those have been really productive. There's been a lot of good analysis, a lot of good modeling, a lot of good discussion with the various detractors on the left, detractors on the right. My friend Representative Acomb is skeptical from one perspective, and I have folks in the commodity sectors, et cetera, who are skeptical from another perspective. But it seems like folks are talking to each other and finding how to accommodate each other's issues and interests and diversity of opinion. So we shall see.
So I guess I'll just add, as someone who's not a part of the Transportation Committee, but I do follow this issue a little bit. My concern is when you start setting standards and mandates for something like this, there can be deep felt problems that occur. And again, I'll use the comparison between where we are today and a district like mine. The average commute is 45 minutes to an hour, and that's not to go 11 miles. That's to go 45, 50, 60 miles across the Northland to go to your place of work, pick up a kid, go to a sporting event. And the concern I have is if we create mandates and standards by the state of Minnesota and we in turn increase those costs of energy to drive somewhere, we are affecting people's quality of life by taking money out of their pocket. I mean, it was a national report last week. The average American needs an extra $11,500 to make ends meet right now. The last thing we should be doing is increasing those costs. Now, at the same time, I think there's policy that we can do that can accomplish the same goals. You know, if we look at these CO2 capture pipelines, they're trying to make cleaner ethanol, which would make cleaner fuels. We could just create policy that, you know, Minnesota's going to accept carbon capture, carbon sequestration. We have the geology here to safely store it better than what they're doing in Iceland. And we could have those fuels and those markets take off and utilize the credits that are part of the IIJA and the IRA. And we could do all that, create cleaner fuels without putting a mandate that would in turn increase costs. So there's two perspectives to look at this, and I try to plant my feet on both sides of the argument so I can find that area of compromise. But I think there is ways to do this without cost and finding a way that's going to work for all Minnesotans.
And I know other people have opinions on that, sorry, but we've got lots of questions. So I wanted to jump to some emerging technology stuff. Can we just talk about, maybe Representative Acomb, you could start with, you know, can you touch on the hydrogen hubs? Do you think that there's more that the legislature should do to sort of foster that vision? And, you know, what are the things that you are most interested in as that sort of comes into focus here?
Did you want me to go first?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I didn't hear that piece. Sorry. I was too excited thinking about the hydrogen hub. I do think that the hydrogen hub really presents Minnesota with an opportunity. And last month, I think, I'm losing track of calendar days, but we had an informational hearing in the Legislative Energy Commission to talk about it and identify, or to give Xcel an opportunity to talk about their intentions around hydrogen, and also to maybe get a little bit of an understanding of maybe what some of the best uses around hydrogen might be. And I will also note that our committee took a tour up to Cummins to do a tour of the facility and see the electrolyzers and as well as their generators. So they're doing great work, and we've got a great opportunity here in Minnesota to benefit from that. I think that as I'm hearing, I'm not an expert in hydrogen, but have been talking to a few, and what I'm hearing is there's some really smart ways to be using it, and then there are some less impactful ways of using it. And so if we're using it to look at industry that is a very high electricity user, so like nitrogen, fertilizer production, or other types, they used steel, I think, the production of steel, as other types of industries that are that use a lot of electricity. And so if we can then use the hydrogen to offset that, that's a great win. I think there was some caution about just putting some hydrogen into the gas pipes, that it really has a very small effect, and it's not going to achieve the outcome that we're looking for and hoping for and needing, honestly, to decarbonize. And so I think that with the hydrogen hub and the work that Xcel Energy is working on that, I do think there's an opportunity for some engagement and hopefully to encourage in a way that is the most impactful.
Senator Rarick, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, you know, the one thing getting into the energy sector, there are so many emerging technologies, it's hard to keep up with all of them. And that's why I just struggle at times that in the legislature for us to really put so much emphasis on promoting one or two, when I'd love to keep our options open. I just heard, I love where we're going with hydrogen. It's exciting hearing about that. I was just reached out to by a couple of brothers out in western Minnesota, and they're developing an ethanol fuel cell. And as they explained that to me, it was, and I hope they've made connection with Senator Frentz already, just the options that could bring and the opportunities there, and how many other technologies are out there that people are working on that we don't even know about yet. And so I don't want to close the door on any of those technologies. I think some of those best ways to decarbonize are probably still in somebody's head right now, and they need that opportunity to be able to do that studying and bring some bring some products to market and have an opportunity to compete. And so that's what I'm hoping that our policies will do, is allow that and support those technologies coming to market, and give us all the opportunities and have every option available, because who knows which technology is actually going to be the best and be the most affordable.
Hey, Senator Frentz, do you have any thoughts? Because we got to get to audience questions, so jump in.
Well, first of all, I agree with my colleague on hydrogen. I think we're asking the question, what is the best use of it? And it's also a technology where I think it's reasonable to expect some additional innovation. So that's good news for us, and it's good news for businesses that are looking at that. I want to just touch real quickly on some other things. First of all, advanced nuclear is still out there to be understood better, and I think Minnesota wants to do that and find out what is available, what's reasonable, and how does it affect our cost and reliability. And then we toured, I think it was Tuesday, St. Thomas's Microgrid Research Lab. Absolutely incredible. I hope you all take a look at it. We're talking a lot about cost, and I'm telling you, my impression is Minnesotans do not want to hear about extra costs. They want to be clean and don't want to pay a penny more than they have to for it. But we also have to talk about reliability and the way in which microgrid research can help us promise and deliver on reliability. And it has a cybersecurity aspect to it, of course, also, which is Dr. Wyckoff and I are back and forth about competition. We want to protect the United States of America, and to the extent that cybersecurity is an important issue, we have to be cognizant of what does that mean, not just here in 2023, but in the years to come. As short as I can make it, Walker.
All right, should we move to audience questions? All right, we're passing around a mic.
Thanks. I'm not done with permitting yet, so I want to come back around to it. I love the thought of having a predictable timeline. I think that's really great for industry, so thank you for your thoughts there. I think a lot of the beginning of today's session with Dr. Wyckoff talked about the incentives, the carrots that we're giving for investment, and permitting tends to be more the stick side of the equation. And I'm curious if there's openness from everyone on this panel to finding ways to build in the carrot element to permitting, whether it's, for example, in areas where there is a lot of prime farmland. Some of the agrivoltaic opportunities in solar are quite compelling. It's not corn and soy, and I understand that's a different form of agriculture for many communities. But is there an opportunity where to say, if we have sheep on a site or if we have crops growing on a site, that you can actually bypass 3 months of the timeline? Or is there any way to see that kind of carrot of innovation for permitting as opposed to focusing solely on the stick? Just wanted to hear some thoughts there. Thank you.
Well, I'll just jump in because I'm carrying 2 pieces of legislation on permitting and regulation reform that have all the timelines that we talked about today. So if you guys are interested, give them a read. But when it comes to the stick, trying to turn that into a carrot, I think there is ways to do it, and that's probably going to be a pretty comprehensive conversation. Let's use manufacturing as a whole. Let's say, if your air permit, you're going to, emit so many parts per million. If you hit this threshold, maybe we could speed it up and you can prove it with science. I think there's a really good conversation to have there, and that's where we need to look at other states. I've actually been in conversation with the folks up in Ontario about a lot of their permitting and regulation reform, because they're kind of leading North America right now and getting things done very quickly, and they're doing it in a very spectacular way where they're working with rural populations, metropolitan populations, but also indigenous populations, and finding a way to, like you said, find a way to turn that stick into a carrot where everyone's going to benefit from projects. So I think looking at our neighbors, looking at ourselves, we can find ways to do that, and it's going to be people like that are in this room that are going to be a part of those conversations, so we can find the ways to do that.
Sure.
That's a great idea. Would love to to explore it some more. I just wanted to mention quickly, one of the ideas, it's not permitting per se, but it's about creating some interest and some incentive around sustainable ag practices in the Clean Transportation Standard package of ideas, and that is in those instances where, for the foreseeable future, when we do have liquid fuels that are going to be used to propel our transportation, part of that is maybe biofuels. If those places where the biofuels are generated are paired with sustainable ag practices, those entities would realize a premium in terms of the credits that are generated, whether that's cover crops or, the list is pretty long on, sustainable crops and things like that. So there is some folks looking at creating incentives in the ag sector around some of these ideas. Thanks.
I would just say you are the current leader in best idea to come up in the Q&A. So congratulations so far. I would fully support the discussion on the carrot in permitting. I think it's an area where you could easily say, we have government contracts that have a liquidated damages provision if you run long, right? So we have a carrot and stick mentality in some of what we do already. I'd also just say, if you want to talk more about that, I'm certainly open to it. We'd want a little input from the agency involved in the permitting. We tend to sit around the legislature and say, well, we're going to do this, without enough input sometimes from the agency, where they sometimes say, yeah, it's a great idea. You can't do it, but it's a great idea. So I think on that idea, I think you'd want to connect with the agency, the department, and say, hey, is this possible? Is this something we can do? And then get back to the table.
Question in the back, yep.
Yeah, it's I think as much a thank you as opposed to a question. My name's Lawrence Rezatar. I'm the Director of International Business Strategy in the Minnesota Trade Office, which is a division within DEED. And our job at the Trade Office is to be the international commercial linkage between Minnesota and the rest of the world. And I wanted to pick up on a couple of Pete's comments. We're in what an Australian government official called competitive federalism. So thank you for all the work that you've done to position Minnesota to be competitive on a federal level. And we also just returned from Australia, and echoing another of Pete's comments, it is a global competition. It's as much about what we're doing vis-a-vis China as coordinating with our allies. And all of the work you've done has helped position Minnesota on a global scale in ways that you might not have realized. So when we've been in Australia, when we have visiting dignitaries come, they are looking for the location in the U.S. to help their businesses coordinate, cooperate, and innovate with the Minnesota companies that are here to build our economy. So thank you for what you've done. Thank you for helping us make our job easier. And we appreciate everybody else in the room on what they're doing as well.
More of that, please. We like those kind of.
I call that the best comment.
Rob Davis with Connexus Energy. Thank you all so much for being here, and thanks, CEEM, for convening today's event. Just want to preface my question with a small humble brag, because Connexus has been humble for a good long time. We've had 5 years of flat rates, followed by a 2.94% rate increase last year based on inflationary pressures. That's half the rate of inflation. So we're kind of obsessed with affordability. Also, with regards to reliability, we're among the top 5% of all utilities nationwide. So not just IOUs or co-ops or munis, all utilities, top 5%. That means our members see one service interruption roughly once every 2.5 to 3 years. My question, though, is about competitiveness, and I hear a lot of talk about budget concerns. The state of Maine pays $1.72, $1.72, for every dollar of taxes, federal taxes they pay. The state of Virginia, $1.47, or excuse me, Maine gets back $1.72, the state of Virginia gets back $1.47, North Dakota gets back $1.12 for every dollar of federal tax they pay. Iowa, Indiana, and Michigan are all roughly at parity for putting in $1 of federal funds, getting $1 back. Minnesota is the most generous payer state at roughly $6.88 of federal taxes paid for every dollar we put in. So the numbers we've saw previously are really exciting about the amount of federal grants we're getting back in 1 year. But with regards to hitting 2040 requirements and maintaining affordability and reliability, are we sufficiently prioritizing and funding efforts at every level to ensure we capture the most of federal funding?
Well,
sorry, I sharpened my pencil this morning.
So this is an old story, and it's something I experienced as a representative of Minneapolis and the metro area. We had the same experience vis-a-vis the rest of the state. On the one hand, we need to adopt a slightly philosophical perspective, which is we're one state. That's fine. That's the way state economies work. You have economic engines and hubs, and et cetera, and investing in the campuses and the roadway systems and the county aid and all of that around the state is good for everyone in my district and vice versa. Likewise, we're one country, et cetera. But it is tilted heavily, and it's particularly galling when those red states are accusing us of being leeches when we're actually supporting them in their lives and their economies. That being said, I think we've been pretty aggressive, especially with the IIJA and the IRA and the CHIPS Act, putting the dollars on the table to bring down and match those dollars. I think we've been recognized federally by members of the Biden administration that we are one of the states that has done the most and the best in putting those dollars on the table, as well as I think Dr. Wyckoff talked about within my bill and the chairs to my left bill, putting dollars on the table that match local units of government as well as the technical support and resources, because it's really, really hard to apply for these competitive grants that are coming through those major streams. So we're trying.
I think it's a great question. First of all, I agree with Scott. We pay in more than we get back out, but we are a relatively affluent state by some measures. And in the same way, we ask individuals with high incomes, Glenn Taylor's a constituent of mine, want them to pay more taxes. Why? Because you have more, and that's the spirit of our progressive tax scheme, and I think it works somewhat at the federal level. I think your real question, Rob, is are we doing everything we can? And I think my answer would be we were well behind a number of states in seeking some of this federal money. That's no big secret. I think we're doing better now. As we staff up, I think we'll see improvements. We're also, as much as we can, getting out the word on grant writing assistance. Part of our issue is a lot of Minnesotans are in communities where they don't have a grant writer. They have city councilmen and county commissioners, and he or she may not really even be familiar with it. So we can do better, and I really think we will. The nice thing is that Minnesota has people like the folks in this room who are well positioned to say to their legislator, hey, we need to seek this. And as you know, we use the regional development councils, Region 9, and hopefully they will continue to see the upside. It's like your businesses, you're not just plotting for the short term, we're trying to win in this competitive race long term, and I think we can do that.
So I would like to also thank those who have been participating online, and we've had a number of questions come in. I know that due to the time constraint, thank you for being generous. We're going a little bit over time. One of the questions was related to workforce development, and I didn't know if any of the legislators on the panel would like to, in a very short, concise way, try and share out, is there a strategy or an approach as we think about workforce development, onboarding, getting folks upskilled, trained, retrained, et cetera, for the opportunities and the demands of a clean energy job?
Well, I'll just go very quickly, and I am going to have to jet maybe even a little bit early because I need to get to the Capitol. I'm going to actually drive away in my fully electric vehicle, by the way, brand new. And I could go on and on about the opportunities and challenges in buying and owning an electric vehicle. We got a long ways to go to make it really easy to both buy and own an electric vehicle. That being said, everyone should get one because they're amazing. So I just want to just commend the amazing leadership and work of the chancellors at all the various Minnesota colleges campuses, as well as the University of Minnesota, as well as the unions and the trade sectors who are really having this discussion and providing a lot of leadership and asking for the resources to build out the facilities and the programs they need. It's just been really, really impressive as I've toured the state with the bonding committee to see the need as well as the leadership there is coming together around fulfilling the need to fill all of these jobs that we need.
I think we continue to work on workforce issues. I think for training, I give us a B+. Remember, we have some demographic issues. You know, we do not have a thriving under 40 age group in Minnesota. I think we will continue to work on that, and it's too bad Senator Champion, who chairs the Senate Jobs Committee, is not here. I think he would be able to speak more intelligently to some of the things we're doing now. But, you know, in the Mankato area, a year ago, we reported 1.8% unemployment, the lowest of any city in the nation. And all my business owner friends said the same thing. We got a new hire, but we took him from another employer. And so some of our challenges in workforce come from the fact that we don't have as many people as we would like.
I just add one thing real quick. Big challenge, though, is housing these folks. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of the communities are telling us, we have the jobs, but they're going, you know, these expansion plans are going to other communities because we just can't find the housing for these folks.
And I think, as someone from the construction industry and now the new lead on education finance, CTE in our schools is one of the big ones that I've been looking at. And, you know, a lot of things that we as a legislature, again, have done over a number of years and putting in all these requirements that it takes to graduate high school is geared towards going to a 4-year institution. And I think that's something that we really have to start talking about is alternative pathways. And in our schools, I was just at Cloquet High School last night. They partnered with Upper Lakes Foods, and they now have a CDL class for seniors in high school that they take all of their coursework in school, and then when they turn 18, Upper Lakes Foods gets them in, and they get to take their test, and they're getting their CDL license free. But one of their biggest constraints is kids don't have an open time in their schedule to take the class. And so we have to create that, whether it's for our construction industries, whether it's for industrial, whether it's for CDL. We have to be looking back into our high schools, not only to make them aware of the opportunities that are there, but to give them the pathways to get there that might be different than that 4-year college course.
Thank you to all the lawmakers here. Thanks for everybody for coming. Unless anyone had any last thoughts on that question, I think we can wrap up our section. Thank you.
I'm clapping for all of you.
Walker, thank you for moderating such an insightful panel. Thank you, legislators, for joining us and sharing your insights and your time with our attendees. I'd like to, again, just thank all of you for joining us for our 2024 Legislative Preview event. Appreciate those also participating online. There will be a post-event survey that will be sent to all attendees. We value your input and your feedback on where and what you've enjoyed. How can we continue to improve our future events? So please take a few minutes when you receive that post-event survey to fill it out. And I think what is clear, a very clear takeaway for me, and as I'm sure for many of you in the room, not only are there some challenges and there's some sticky issues that we collectively need to continue to solve for as we move forward, but certainly there is tremendous opportunity ahead. And that means business opportunity, it means jobs, it means prosperity for Minnesota businesses and for Minnesota citizens. So everyone in this room, online, et cetera, thank you for being a part of this effort and the role that you play. So with that, I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you again, and we will see you next year for the start of the legislative session.